do you say we get started? Why not? I mean, there's more ice cream to be had and all that good stuff. Okay. So my name is Erica Jacoby. I'm the Executive Director of Higher Things. Here with...
I am Pastor Harrison Goodman. I'm the Content Executive at Higher Things.
And we're here to talk to you about Gen Z, your survival guide. And the spoiler alert is, hey, it's all about the gospel, right? Just briefly... Oh, we got more people coming in. That's great. Come on in. No, you're fine. You're good. A lot of distractions with the ice cream and all that. Yeah, come in. I know it's hard seeing people you haven't seen for a long time. So at any rate, Pastor Goodman and I work for a youth organization. And our mission is to make the gifts of Christ Jesus known to youth and young adults. And we do that through events and resources, all kinds of different things. And so we're just here to talk to you, not necessarily about our organization, but about the fact that we've been in youth ministry for a good amount of time, each of us. We just want to let you know what we've sort of learned in the process, trial and error. It hasn't been perfect. It hasn't been excellent. In my former life, my former career before I came aboard doing mission work full-time, I was a public high school teacher in Minneapolis area, and so I spent quite a bit of time with Gen Z up until about 3 years ago. So we're super excited to talk to you about Gen Z. They are all born now, so we'll get into that in just a second. But today our goal is really to kind of present you with some of the data about Gen Z, and then to give you some tips and tools to take away in your interactions, in your churches, and in your ministries. And so please, we like to keep this very conversational, so stop us if there's something you don't understand. If you have questions, we are happy to talk to you about those. Oops, I need to use this thing. Lots of devices. Okay, so here are our kind of contextualize our different generations. We're not going to go all the way to the silent generation, but we will talk about everybody else. Are there any boomers in here? Raise your hand if you're a boomer. Awesome. Welcome, boomers. You know I have to say, okay, boomer, right? Yeah. And unfortunately, that applies to every generation but Gen Z, right? Yeah. If you say, okay, boomer, it's just anybody older than them, right? Yeah. So, okay, baby boomers. So worldview is kind of a big deal, right? Worldview is kind of a web of habit-forming beliefs about kind of the big life questions that help you make sense of your experience. And so each generation has experienced some things. So I just addressed you, baby boomers. What were some of the things that happened in the world that sort of shaped your experiences? What are the big things? Hippies, Woodstock, right? Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Right? What else happened? Beatles, there you go. Right? Vietnam, right? What was that? Watergate, good.
Kent State.
What was that?
Kent State.
You're right.
Oh, okay, yep. You guys went to space, right?
Disco,
baby. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm gonna cop to that one though.
You're gonna, yeah, right? He's not ashamed. What was your word? What was your word for like? Give us a generational word.
Rad.
Groovy. Okay, groovy. All right, excellent. Cool. I still. Oh, keep on trucking.
which is gonna come back.
Yeah. Oh, has it? Well, just you keep coining it and see if it comes back.
I think it will.
All right. How about the next generation, Gen X? Any Gen Xers in here? Yay! Probably the parents of Gen Z, right? So Gen Xers. Okay, welcome Gen Xers. What is your generation kind of known for?
Hairspray.
Hairspray. Mole hair. Yeah, right. I love that.
Banana clips.
Banana. I got one in today.
I have one. Yep, I still have mine.
Awesome. I love that.
Well, you said it. I'm going to steal what you said.
Yeah, please.
Latchkey kids.
Latchkey kids.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. Our parents were boomers and they didn't care about us. And so they sent us home from school and let us supervise ourselves. I totally had a key around my neck. My brother and I tell stories about when we'd forget our key and figure out how to break into our house and the whole thing.
That is criminals.
And we had this whole thing where we weren't supposed to watch TV when we got home.
Oh, yeah.
And we'd have to turn it off like a half an hour before Mom and Dad came home because it was too hot. They'd come home and feel it.
Yeah.
So different now, right? How about any millennials? I know they never like to raise their hand because we shame you, right? Those millennials get shamed all the time. We love you, millennials.
We love you too.
Yeah, I know, buddy. So what is your generation kind of known for? What kind of shaped your worldview? What big events?
9/11.
9/11. Yeah. Columbine.
Yeah.
Columbine was a big one. That kind of school shooting thing kind of came about. What else came about in your age?
The internet.
Google.
Google, yes, totally. Social media really came about in your age. Yep. So Gen Z should be thanking you guys, right?
Yeah. Or cursing.
Or cursing you, one or the two, not sure, right? Video games. Remember how Y2K was going to be like a huge deal? And that kind of didn't pan out. Okay, and then finally Gen Z. And of course, we don't have any Gen Z in here, but anybody have Gen Z children? Okay. So what are some things that have really shaped them, obviously?
Social media.
Social media, yep.
Video games.
Video games, yep.
COVID.
COVID, thank you. That's a new one that's very recent. Yeah, what did you say, Julie?
Computers, their whole world.
Their whole world. In fact, they're called digital natives, right? Sandy Hook, ISIS, they went through the Great Recession, which actually has affected them. Yes, the cell phone. In fact, they call them digital natives because even though millennials kind of grew up around it, they weren't like babies around it. They weren't raised by it, exactly. 100%.
When they understand how to hold people.
Right.
Right.
Have you seen like little kids who can't talk and they're like, they
Yeah.
can like open your phone and like do the things? It's kind of terrifying. Yeah, their brains are actually wired differently. Kind of fascinating. All right, very good. Thanks. Anything else? Oh, first black president. Right, first black president. Yep.
Phones used to have wires.
Right. They just don't get
Used to be
it.
attached to the wall.
They just
They
don't
will
get
never
it.
know the
Blow their
pleasure
minds when you tell them
of
that.
slamming that phone down.
That's right. It was so sad. Or like walking across the kitchen. Right? Did you have the really long cord? Yeah.
Not only the cord to the wall, but also then the phone cord was the
Right.
curly one.
Right. And call waiting. Remember call waiting and stuff like that?
Oh, and then mom and dad could pick it up in the other room.
Right. Or your brother. Not cool.
I'm gonna tell him.
Oh, he knows. Yeah, he knows. All right.
So Gen Z gets difficult because it's actually, and they actually recognize this themselves. Gen Z culture is having a deep understanding of meme culture, but simultaneously being unable to explain it to anyone or even yourself. One of the problems with this is that we have a hard time encapsulating how to talk to them because they can't even describe themselves. And so understand too, when your communication is actually either evolved or devolved, depending on how you want to look at it, into memes. There's only going to be so much long-form conversation that you can have to figure out what the things are. So we start to define it by the trappings. This means, too, that there's a certain degree of irony that sort of actually becomes a dialect all to itself. The sarcasm that's built in, like Gen Xers really sort of wanted to make sarcasm their own, but
Yeah.
Gen Z has perfected the art and they breed it.
Yeah, they
And
do.
so there's this thing that happens, is I can relate to a Gen Xer, I can go a generation above me, I can even relate to a boomer and talk about phone cords because my grandma had one. But at the same time, when I start to try and relate down into Gen Z, it's always going to be at least a little bit awkward because like they can't even define what they themselves are, so how am I going to understand it and replicate it?
Yep.
You see the problem here.
Yeah, that's kind of the paradigm. And Gen Z considers themselves to be members of kind of in a amalgam of distinct digital communities, right? That is their kind of world. Whereas previous generations, they didn't really interrelate that way. They didn't contextualize that way with their friendships and even with their own reputations to maintain, right? Their digital reputation a lot of times is even more important to them than their interpersonal one. So it's a very, very, contextually, it's extraordinarily different than any other generation that's living.
Do they even have the interpersonal?
Right. Well, they
what we need
feel
to talk
it,
about.
yeah, and that's what we need to talk about, and that's what kind of needs to inform what we do with them. And so I actually want to have a little fun with this to demonstrate with you. I asked you guys all your I forgot to ask some of the Gen Xers. What was one of your words for your generation?
Totally.
Totally.
Awesome.
Awesome. Yes. Like totally.
And if you're from New England, it's wicked awesome.
Wicked, I love that.
It's wicked awesome.
It is wicked awesome. Okay, and I didn't ask you millennials, but millennials, what did you have? What were some of your words?
Cool beans.
Cool beans.
That was one.
Cool beans.
We actually say LOL.
You say LOL.
Yeah,
Okay,
we
okay.
say
Uncomfortable.
Text speech out loud.
So what I want to do to kind of demonstrate to you how different this is, we're actually gonna read this aloud. So I need someone to volunteer to be girl Gen Z and someone to be boy Gen Z. Would you two mind reading for us? You're gonna read pink and you're gonna read blue. This is
Oh,
gonna bore
Lord.
you.
This is my favorite part.
This is gonna be
This is
a little
gonna be
ridiculous,
mine.
okay? So here's what's wrong with this from the outset. So these are not written, right? We used to pass notes and get in trouble. These are text conversations, but we have to read them out loud, but they wouldn't do that, right? Their whole life is like
In their
digital,
head.
right? In their head. Okay, so what's gonna happen is I'm gonna put a phrase up there, you guys are gonna read, you're pink or blue, and then I will translate. Now, I want to tell you that this is a year out of date, so some of these things may have changed. I haven't checked with my nieces lately. Last year they fixed it. But literally, this is a little out of, I'm just going to be honest, because it's a year old.
Well, it
It's a
changes
little out of
by sometimes the week,
date.
let alone the month.
Meme culture is so fast.
What are you doing?
All right, here we go.
You find a pull-up?
Which means,
Thank you.
Dinner.
you're finna. Are you coming to pick me up?
Bet cake in my face, ATM.
That's right. You bet I'm putting on my makeup at the moment.
What's the move?
Which, does anybody know what that means?
What's
What
the
are we
move?
doing?
What's happening next? What are we doing? What's the plan?
About to commit the big death.
That's right. What does that mean? Phone's about to die. Phone death approaching. Hang on, I need to charge. Okay? Now I'm really sorry about this, but they really do talk in emojis. That means.
Haha, I'm dead.
Dead.
Do you know why they do that emoji? What that means?
Emotionally dead?
No, it means LOL.
Yeah.
LOL. It means you made. That was so funny. I died. Yes, I'm serious.
Wow.
I'm serious. This is her daughter. She's like, "Are you serious?" And it was her daughter that helped
Wow.
me. Right?
I can go back and read every text thread.
Yeah, you do. How about this?
Not feeling this fit.
Girls
Trying
and
to
selfie.
keep from looking basic, CCC.
It's basic.
Oh, basic.
Trying to keep from looking basic.
Basic.
Which means I'm not sure I like my outfit. I am attempting to look good. Okay.
That new hair color just hits different.
Which means he's wisely complimenting her hair.
Ah.
Yeah, good job.
Not me changing my hair color every other week.
Which means I'm a little embarrassed that I keep changing my hair color every other week, right?
Wow. Nothing sus but you passed the vibe check.
I
Here.
You are doing great. Doing great. You aren't suspicious or anything. I already think you're cool. All right, are you here yet?
Hold on.
All right, sus is suspicious. Okay.
Suspect.
Did anybody recognize any of those? Yeah. All right. You know this one?
Oh, for sure, no cap.
Oh, nice job. Which means definitely not lying. Full show, no cap? Anyone?
No cap.
So, remember your generation.
Now, do
Yes.
they actually talk this way?
Yes.
Yes.
Or is this is not just text lingo?
Well, so no. Here's the thing,
Yeah.
because of the irony involved. So I can, as a millennial, say LOL, and this is something that is perfectly reasonable to say out loud. But these things are so ingrained digitally to them that the idea of sort of divorcing the technology from the way that we communicate with each other becomes foolish.
Yeah.
And so no, you don't say them out loud because it's obnoxious.
Yeah.
But you can also text it with a complete straight face. This is the irony that is sort of baked into this generation.
You won't really hear them, but you might, but you'll hear it ironically. Does that make sense?
But their ironic communication is their serious communication, and their serious
Right.
communication is their ironic communication. And that
Right.
makes absolutely no sense at all.
Yep.
So when you tell a child cap, they'll laugh at you.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Means lying.
Lying.
Yeah.
call cap on them, which means you're calling them a liar.
Cap means shooting.
I want to push back.
Yeah, I was
a little
gonna
bit
Please do.
there. It also depends on where you're at.
Exactly.
That's true.
Because
You're
that means
100%
something
true.
Totally.
You're
I
right.
agree with what you're saying,
It's very regional
but
because when I go to different conferences, because
No, correct.
I'm in Colorado now, but my first conference, it was after I was teaching in Minnesota, right? And so my Minnesota kids helped me. And depending on where I was at conference, they were like, we don't use that way, we use it this way. So even regionally, you're going to, because this moves at lightning speed, I'm telling you, this is out of date because it's from last summer. Okay, I haven't updated it. So you're absolutely right. Thank you. That's a really good point. Yep. It's a living language that, yeah. So let's talk a little bit just about the scope or the bigness of Gen Z. So Gen Z is the largest American generation to date. 86.4 million, even bigger than the millennials. So that means 1 in 5 Americans is of Gen Z. This is the largest missional challenge in the United States. It's a big deal. We have to get this right. It's incredibly important. Next generation, by the way, I think they're calling it Alpha. We don't know that much about them, right? Because they're only about 7 years old, the oldest. But yeah, we got to start over. But they're going to share some similarities, obviously. But this is a really, really big deal, just in the scope of things, right? 86.4 million. Okay, they're also the most ethnically diverse generation. Okay, no longer are they predominantly Caucasian. They're actually going to be much more diverse. Okay, so I'm going to take a minute here and ask you to talk with a friend next to you. And what I want you to do is I want you to wrestle a little bit with these questions. What do you currently already know? What are your observations about Gen Z? How do they use tech? Where do they go to find truth? Kind of what's their racial makeup? Particularly talk about that in your area because that's important. What are their views on mental health, on social issues, and on religion? And we're going to give you like 5 minutes because we kind of want to hear what you guys think. So make sure you kind of talk about all of the things, and in a minute we'll ask you to share out. So turn and talk to a buddy, somebody near you, 2 or 3 people around you, and talk a couple minutes about what you think.
Yes. Learning about them.
That's why it's non-existent. I admit, I struggle on the because it's kind of like I did but now it's even less.
Also, it's like each
But I was good with you. Okay, well, and I'm from Arizona, so it's great to make it.
Time you watch it in our area, her mentality
We're just kind of trying to figure out Gen Z together. We're just sort of going for it, recognizing what do we know about them.
beginning of it to the end.
Or it's 1994, I'm going forward. That's why I say.
Do they look back?
Yeah, they make all of us, but that's because
They include more 80s into that.
they call all the studies from
The office is actually where when I left 10 years ago,
that they moved because they found
white minorities.
Where Gen Z
don't value their
That's the reality.
It's 1984. These kids are living, breathing, loving kids in 1984.
that's why everything
Give a shit.
and that's why it's figures that kind of
We need to start taking pictures.
All right, so what do we got? What have we figured out? How have we solved all of the world's problems
Yes.
here? What do you know about Gen Z's use of technology and how important tech is to them?
Anybody have any answers for that?
They're glued to their phones.
Their
It's
technology.
extremely
They're
important.
addicted.
And their education system is reinforcing that. Because
Yes.
they don't write anything.
So this is no longer than a
Access your homework
substitute.
online.
Yeah, this is actually the main avenue then of how we interact. Yes, Michelle.
Yeah, so right before I left teaching 2.5 years ago, we had a conference where we had to learn about new diagnoses.
Yeah.
And one of the newest ones was this anxiety that's actually labeled now as a disability, but an anxiety that
Being away from
a
it.
child has when they are separated from their phone, and it was being used as in the teaching world as a reason to allow your child, the students in your classroom, to have their phone because anxiety is causing them
To be separated from it causes them anxiety. It's a disability.
It's a
They have to have it. What she's saying is in school you get an accommodation for that.
it's like a security blanket.
Yeah.
I was at one of these earlier in the day, and they said that more than 50% would say of themselves they are addicted to their
Yes,
Yes.
they would absolutely.
Let
tell
alone
you.
the ones who can't copy it. Yeah.
Yep, yep. Yeah, was there somebody else? I saw somebody else's hand up? Yeah.
All right. How about what are their sources for truth? This is important for us as the church.
Friends and TikTok.
Influencers, TikTok, friends, memes.
Anything but a printed.
Usually,
Yeah.
So there actually has been a shift away then from the old medias, the print, which are looked on with genuine suspicion.
I want to say they're peers.
Their peers.
Because, like, if their peers don't approve of what they're doing, it's
yeah, it's usually not an elder.
No one over 30.
No one over 30.
Well, wait, can we back up? How many over 30?
Just barely.
How many are over?
You still count. Sorry.
Yeah.
They're very quick to remind me I'm ancient.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're talking about sources of information there because the basis of truth is yourself.
No.
What's
So-
true for you is true for you, what's true for me is true for me, and they don't have to be the same thing.
Okay, so we have a full embrace of a postmodern worldview. Good. Okay. What is their racial makeup? Do we know
Kind of
this?
tipped our hat to this.
We did a little bit, but do you remember?
Diverse.
Very.
How do they
Well-
feel about that though?
And they're okay with it. Well, yeah, they're okay with it.
They're proud of it. Yeah.
Right, and there's a lot of appropriation going on, cross-racial
Yeah,
appropriation.
cross-racial is, I mean, there's a lot of amalgamation.
That's a major source of identity.
And you see that on ads on TV.
Yes.
Again, I'm not
Yeah.
condoning, but I'm just saying that's
It's being
probably
reinforced.
why then
Yeah.
Gen Zs need that.
Yes.
What are their views on mental health?
number one life issue.
Number
Yeah.
one life issue.
Good.
Totally acceptable.
Number one life issue.
Number
They
one.
would say that about,
Wow.
100%.
we're not saying that about them, they're saying that.
They're
They
so
say
mad.
that. That's what they say about themselves.
Their the number one life issue they're facing is
What do they mean by, what do you mean by the mental health?
Well, we'll dive into that a little bit. We just wanted to see what you thought, but how compared to other generations, how open are they to getting help for mental health?
If you're a boomer, can you see a counselor without talk about it publicly?
No.
Yeah.
There's been a shift, right?
Yeah.
No stigma.
There's who caused that shift? Let's actually
They
embrace
did,
this.
it's going up.
Where did this start from? The comfort with acknowledging I struggle with anxiety. I am seeing a professional mental health worker on a regular basis. When could you start saying that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or Woody
They
Allen.
called us snowflakes, but yes.
Millennials, yeah.
Right.
I was just gonna say with that, I was, as a Gen Xer, I was just looking at it, kids that go to like continuing education schools.
Mhm.
When I was a kid, that meant you had issues.
Yeah, right.
And it was not acceptable.
It was not a
If
good
you had
thing.
a mental breakdown,
Yeah.
that was not, that was like not talked
There was
about.
not compassion
Now
for
it's
that.
just like, oh, I get too much anxiety, I'm at home.
Yeah.
I
IEPs.
IEPs.
They get smell like candy.
Yep.
Where we weren't even allowed to say it.
Right, right. Yeah, no, you're absolutely
No, I
right.
have
The
teachers
stigma
that
has
didn't believe
changed.
in ADHD when I was in a school. I understand.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's like almost your ticket into the culture.
It's a framework.
It's a way to
of
be
common
unique.
Discussion.
Mhm,
Okay.
It's a
yeah.
framework, yep.
So with that in mind, what are their views on social issues? How important are these? What are the social issues that are important, and how important are they? They're very important.
It's like a religion.
Well, it's interesting because it's not. There are good things and bad things, and Michelle can speak to this. What are their views on
So
life
they're
issues?
very pro-life.
Yeah, the most pro-life.
Most pro-life generation that we've ever seen.
Yeah.
And yet they're also very anti-marriage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not as far as embracing living together.
Yeah.
Because actually there's a
What a
turn in
practice.
this generation to early marriage.
Yeah.
But they believe not in a biblical marriage, that it's okay for a man and a man to get married. And
Yes, yes. They're very tolerance is kind
Yeah,
of.
yeah.
They're very tolerant, and they're very much about unique identities. We'll get into that a little bit more. But
And you,
so yeah.
you see where we're going then, because what are their views on religion? Tolerant? Pluralist?
Okay.
I'm seeing a lot of head shaking here. What are their views on religion otherwise? Let's go from the.
It's demonized.
It's demonized.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Good,
exist.
good. Thank you for
If
being
believe in
honest.
Jesus, they basically like, wow, you're a grown up,
I
believes in
believe in
Santa
fairy
Claus,
tales.
you're
Right.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yep. Good. Okay, we're gonna delve on into that a little bit more. So let's dive in a little bit on Gen Z and tech. So, right, this is them socially engaging, right?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Like, have you been in a room with Gen Z, and how do they talk to each other? Are they having an actual conversation a lot of the time?
They're texting each other.
Texting each other.
So here's some interesting information about Gen Z. There's a lot of data in this, but I think it's important to kind of demonstrate and contextualize what's going on. But here's their screens. 95% own a smartphone. This is like majorly changed. There's like never been anything else where every kid and in any other generation had the same thing that allowed them to communicate, right? This is a big deal.
What's the average age they get a phone now? First grade?
I'm not sure on that statistic. It's pretty early.
It's getting younger.
It's getting younger.
So here's the thing: as it becomes normalized as part of education, there are elementary schools
Yep.
whose teachers assign this work through cell phones.
And particularly, I would say, obviously in COVID, if they weren't already kind of using technology for education, they had to dive in, right? That you had to Zoom, you had to do all the things. You had to make sure, in a lot of districts, if they didn't have a one-to-one technology thing going on, they made sure they got to it right away because they were doing school at home, right? 83% also own a laptop. 78% own an advanced gaming console. Yes?
Would there be a difference with genders on that?
It's pretty even.
Really?
It's
Yeah.
pretty
So
even.
girls,
The girls' game.
Yeah, girls are pretty even on that.
Girls
Yeah.
are gaming.
They
just
are.
as
They
much as
really
the
are.
boys,
Yep. They
yeah.
just. 50% have a desktop computer. 29% use their smartphone past midnight on a nightly basis, and this is pulling them. So do what you will with that number, right?
This is pulling them? Oh,
Polling.
Polling them.
Asking.
Polling them. I'm sorry, polling them.
Only 29% is
So, some of them may have been like, no, that's not.
Yeah.
51% report daily dependence on the internet for access to other people and connections. Yes.
How is this any different than their mom and dad?
That's a really good question.
Follow along.
Yeah, yep. So what do you guys think? Are they tech savvy or tech dependent? Michelle, what'd you say?
They're both.
Both. They're not. This isn't mutually exclusive, right? It's kind of interesting. So here's the stuff. Here's kind of where we're seeing some interesting data. 69% become uncomfortable after being away from internet access for more than 8 hours. 27% say they can last only 1 hour away. This is a real thing. I wondered how much learning I could get done in my classroom if I didn't have to police the phone thing. It was, and to even get parents to kind of help out with it, because I was a language teacher, I was a foreign language teacher. I love using technology to teach, but there's a time and a place for it. And that was really the big challenge, right? Because some of them they truly do get anxiety. They show signs of addiction. So again, 60% believe their reputations will be the primary determinant of their dating options in the near future. Their online reputations. Their online reputations are incredibly important to them, more so than I said, kind of the in-person. 48% say they want a standardized form of authentication for every people they meet online so they can trust that that person isn't misrepresenting themselves.
I don't even understand what that means.
They want a way to make sure that if you're interacting with somebody on social media, that that person is who they say they are.
Online
They
ID.
want an online ID form.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
They
Essentially.
want you to be able to track everything you're doing online.
They're a lot more
Because-
comfortable with the lack of
Unconstitutional
privacy.
Yeah.
They are, but they're also a highly pragmatic generation.
Of course. Yeah.
Very practical generation. So they're like, well, if I'm going to spend that much time online, I want to make sure that I know I'm safe, right? Any thoughts on that? Does that surprise you? Raise your, like on a scale of 1 to 5, show me on your hand. 5 being I'm super surprised by this data, 1 being I'm not surprised at all. Okay. We've got varying degrees of surprise. Okay. Very good.
Now,
Yes.
So I'm a Gen X that had millennials actually, so I
Okay.
was a young mom.
Mhm.
And I remember arguing with teachers about they need to do their research on the internet. And I said, I am the consumer,
Yep.
not my child.
Yep.
And so, of course, it was a losing battle because then my sister has younger kids in the Gen Z, and
Yep.
they can't get their homework if they're not on the internet.
And particularly after COVID, right?
Right.
Like there, you lose
just
the
got worse, yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
For you.
Yes.
So one part of my community has a lot of poverty,
Yes.
and that seems to be appropriate for part of the culture around it. But there's another part of the impoverished kids.
Yeah.
They don't have laptops, they don't have tablets, they don't have cell phones, they don't have.
Not even cell
We
phones?
send them home with food because they won't have that for the weekend. I mean, we
Yeah.
have 50% of the kids in some of the schools are on subsidized lunches.
Yeah.
So that-
Yeah. Free and
So-
reduced lunches. Yeah.
This is good.
This
for
is
the
limit-
one- This is good for the ones that have it, but I was just curious as far as.
I will tell you, even in my district, we had a relatively large amount of kids on free and reduced lunch and not accessing technology, but a lot of them still had cell phones.
Yeah.
They really did.
It's their,
Even in the third world, a
Obama
lot of
phone.
them, they have cell phones. And I'm not disagreeing with you. I believe you. There's still that 5%, right, that maybe don't have a smartphone. So that would be kind of unusual, but I mean, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
But then think about too that generation.
It's okay, I'm not-
No, you're not wrong. But I mean, but if you think about that too, that would put them kind of in a unique footing within the generation, right? To not be able to socially engage that way, which would be, they would feel pretty disadvantaged.
Yeah.
Is there a question?
I run demographic reports for pastors in my district. I'm with LCEF in Wisconsin, and I had an inner city pastor, and we did a yearly thing with him like 3 weeks ago, and he confirmed that he collects it, but he had no idea, like the top 8 groups were high-tech users.
Mm-hmm.
So, but this stuff blows my mind because it's beyond what I even imagined. So, I believe your people probably do, and this is Milwaukee,
We're already almost
so
out of
I
time.
don't know where you're.
Arkansas.
We're doing good.
Ask for a demographic report, it will help you.
Yeah, thank you for that, because I know LCEF does that free. They do that free if you want any kind of demographic. Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about their mental health, since now we've talked a bit about technology, because I think you'll all agree they're a little bit connected here, aren't they? Potentially. Interesting statistics.
1 in 4 have reported feeling more emotionally distressed. Let's just sort of shotgun this.
Yep.
Keep it coming.
Yep.
Report higher rates of anxiety, depression, and distress than any other age group. 58% of them report unmet social needs. They are lonely.
And this is particularly interesting because I wanted the post-COVID data. There isn't a ton yet.
2 to 3 times more likely than other generations to report thinking about, planning, or attempting suicide within the 12-month period of COVID.
In fact, the CDC has declared a mental health crisis among this generation. It was already kind of approaching pre-COVID.
Yeah.
We're there. I don't know if you have any Gen Z students. I know my daughter. I'll be real honest with you. She's in her first year at. She's Gen Z. She's 19. First year at North Dakota State University. Just called me last week and just like, Mom, I need to talk to a counselor. This is just getting. This is a lot. This is just a lot. This has been really difficult. I think the past year or two has kind of weighed down on me. And she usually tends to be a really well-engaged, gregarious kind of gal, but she just, and I was really proud of her. She's like, this is stressful. This is hard. I don't know what's going on. I don't, it's really becoming more and more common. Yeah.
And then pair that with the use of drugs and so forth.
Yep.
That are now finding more lacing with fentanyl. And I have a cousin, first cousin, who runs a drug and alcohol program for youth, and she's lost more kids to overdose in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Could you?
And then she did the COVID.
Yeah.
Could you feel the room drop as we started to talk about their mental health? Like, it was cute for a little bit.
It was cute.
Because and all of a sudden we started to talk about what everybody across generations recognizes as a crisis. And the first thing we do, because these are our kids.
Yep.
We're trying to fix it. And so the number one thing that we're going to pin this on is
Phones.
Very, thank you. There has to be at least somebody here to blame technology. So I want to ask you a very simple question. Is technology evil?
Oops, this is the wrong. Yeah, sorry, I'm on the wrong slide.
You're right there. Keep it there.
Okay.
No. This is technology. You realize that, right? Like, if a monkey used this to pry ants out of a hill, we would put it on TV and say,
I told you couldn't use that.
I would get in trouble with
you
this.
You would, yeah.
Technology is just a thing. It's what we do with it. And so there is this sort of pushback against tech because it's the newest thing. And so we sort of do correlation and causation and pretend they're the same thing for just a minute and said, what if we just got them to put down their phones? Then they would be fine. Like, let's think back to simpler times, like the Crusades, when nobody was on their phone. And it was just people living in the moment, killing each other over money in the name of religion. Why can't we go back to something simpler?
Yeah, right.
That is too simplistic.
Right, it is.
So,
you're right.
This is actually it, though. There is a level of nuance that maybe we ought to talk about. What does this mean? There is a trend here. We are making normal things absurd. We are taking everything that is normal in society and creation itself, and we are starting to make it absurd. And there's always going to be somebody to talk about, well, how many genders have popped up since Gen Z? And this is not just a discussion over how many genders there are. This is actually not even a question over how do we normally communicate, but rather let's take it into simply the realm that we have done something with technology that has given us a freedom to do something completely foreign any other time. We've divorced communication from, we have a fancy word called vocation. The callings in life that you have been given. And so I am a pastor. And so when I walk into my church and I talk, it's heard differently than the youth group. When you as a mom walk in and talk, it's different. And here's the thing. Can I actually go online and be heard as not a pastor? Very easily. Can they go online and be heard as something completely apart from vocation? This is how God has set up good order. It's not just that it is not good for man to be alone because we do weird things like eat tacos in the bathroom. It is genuinely because God has set up creation so that we will interact. I know it's weird, I'm sorry.
He's on the phone.
We're supposed to interact with each other. And so when God gives us vocations, they're always in pairs. Have you noticed this? So if there's a husband, there's going to be a wife. If there's a parent, there's going to be a child. If there's a pastor, there's going to be a teacher. If there's a government, there's going to be a citizen. It's back and forth because we're actually supposed to relate to one another. And the thing that technology does is it lets us actually separate how we relate from each other to that we relate to each other. And so things get weird. It takes the normal ways that we would interact with each other and it makes it absurd. And so when we start to deal with this, we need to understand that we actually, instead of leaning further into this as the church, the absurdity of it all, because there are certain on both sides of a spectrum here that want to sort of jump into the culture war and have a fight with somebody over how many genders there are, when we simply rather recognize that maybe these kids are finding such a hard time fitting in that they have to create a new label for themselves because they cannot identify with that which has been proposed to them as traditionally male or female. Rather, what if we talk to them about something that was, in fact, normal? And by normal, I don't mean common. because there's a difference. And we always sort of mix the two together. Common means I can find it everywhere. But normal doesn't mean just I can see it everywhere. Normal means this is how it's supposed to be. So for example, I learned when I was 8 years old that people will look at you strange if you admit to eating tacos in the bathroom.
Did you just say today years old?
Today years old.
You gotta stay on your toes when you're
So, it might have been common, but it's not how it's supposed to be. We mix these two things up because we look around and we say, well, it must be normal because it's happening everywhere. You can find something that is common but not normal, and simply this. How about sin? Does God want there to be sin in the world? I know, because he says 10 different times, thou shalt not. But can I find sin everywhere? It's not how it's supposed to be. In fact, that's sort of our religion. God sent his son into the world to die on the cross to take away the sins of the world. We cannot simply lean further into the absurd. We actually maybe want to embrace the normal, the way that God wants to work inside of his creation, the way that he works to set things to how they're supposed to be again. So for us, that's actually easy now to address sin, because I know where to find normal. It's the sins of the world nailed to the cross. Jesus dying for those kids struggling to find their own identities. We embrace the normal and then recognize that tech doesn't stop normal. Tech is a tool. The same with a stick that I would get taken away from me. Well, that means that when we start to use the stick, we cannot ignore the way that God would normally work. And so I can't do all of the fun things that I would love to do with this right now. Rather, I have to take my vocation with me wherever I go. And so if I'm going to go online, maybe going online as a father, going online as a husband, going online as a pastor, going online as the places God has actually equipped you to work, don't go away online. And all of the problems tend to come in when we embrace the absurdity of it and say, I can make a new me online.
Yep. Oops, I'm sorry, I lost our place.
Give me a clicky click.
Okay, I'm on it.
All right, so understand then, when we start to talk about when they are looking for truth, that it sounds absurd.
Yep.
We know.
So there are a few things. These are the kind of the common behaviors I want to there are 4 of them that kind of happen in Gen Z, right? I think I talked with a few of you before we started getting rolling here. It's kind of funny when we talk about different generations and characteristics. Sometimes we bucket the label, but a lot of times there are some things that are just really common and true because, as we mentioned, certain things happened in that generation that affected you, affected your worldview. So I want to talk a little bit about Gen Z's 4 modes of behaving to kind of help you understand their worldview. So the big one is they have, it's the idea of undefined identity. Think of them as identity nomads. That's how they see themselves. The greatest form of expression of individual truth is to not define yourself in only one way. Okay? In fact, gender fluidity may be the most telling reflection of that undefined ID. It's not the only one. But Gen Zers are kind of always connected. They constantly evaluate lots of different sources of information because they're always connected digitally and different influences. So for them, their identity is a place to experiment and to test and to change. In fact, 7 out of 10 Gen Zers say it's important to defend causes related to identity. So it's a really big deal to them. They're more interested in previous generations in human rights, in any matter that is related to race or ethnicity, and in that LGBTQ issue, and feminism as well. And this is why. Okay. They're also defined kind of as communaholics, meaning they are radically, it's a good to be radically inclusive. And this is not a bad thing, right? They want everyone to feel welcome and included. This is a good thing about Gen Z. But in their search for truth, it allows them to connect through different truths from different people, right? Okay. They're also dialoguers. They do not like confrontation. They have fewer confrontations because they want to talk about things, because it's important to them to understand different truths and the way other people see them. And then finally, I mentioned they're very pragmatic. They're a very realistic generation. Think how much they've seen and how much data they've brought on through YouTube and all their sources of information online. So they're really about living life pragmatically. and finding kind of the truth behind all things. They really are large consumers of information for that purpose, if that kind of makes sense. So these are kind of the common behaviors you're going to kind of see in Gen Z as they interact with the world and live life. Sources for truth. Don't ask God, just ask your Google, right? Anything else you guys would put on there? Yeah. Reddit is one, yeah, Reddit for some, I think older. I'm finding the younger ones, the grown Gen Zers are definitely kind of Reddit. Discord, yep, Discord, you're right. Discord is another big one, yep, good one. So here's some interesting facts. 59% of Gen Z and millennials say they keep up with the news more with video content. 41 say they keep up with it by text. And this is going to be true. This is their preferred method of engaging with information. They're going to prefer to watch a video. They just are. 30% of Gen Z and 26% of millennials say that social media is their primary source for news. Okay? Do with that what you will.
Have your studies shown that they're more engaged politically than previous
Yes.
generations?
Yes.
Yeah.
They are. They're very much into social causes. Yeah. Very much so. You're absolutely right. So the interesting thing now, just it's speaking again in Sources for Truth, 10% of boomers have a biblical worldview. 7% of Gen X have a biblical worldview. 6% of millennials have a biblical worldview. What percent do you think Gen Z has?
1. Wow.
It's actually more than that. 4. Good. Really good. 4%. 4% have a biblical worldview. Do you want to?
No, you're good.
Okay, good. We good. All right, let's keep rocking. This is kind of a fun meme. Can you guys see it? Here's the millennial. This is nihilism, right? Nothing in life matters. Very sad about it.
We are.
You are. Yeah, I know you are.
Yeah.
Gen Z. Nothing in life matters. Yeah. It's very accurate, actually.
That's a pretty good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
I'm
That is
good.
like,
I'm going to break it down and give you some
because that
data.
is like nuts.
It is not. I know, right?
We just had a major rollover accident of 2 cars with Gen Zs in
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
And one of the drivers did a TikTok about thank God for, and this is her quote, thank God for beauty filters.
So there's we need to recognize
Because
that there's a hopelessness
Right,
that
yeah.
has pervaded this. As you're detaching things from reality, if you're making the normal things absurd, there is nothing to latch onto. And so because at a certain point in time, when you cannot fix a thing, we actually, the old, like if you were a Roman Catholic, they would talk about the 7 deadly sins.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And they talked about sloth, and I always thought this was just eating Cheetos and watching Netflix, and I was really good at it. But sloth isn't laziness, sloth is hopelessness. What we have
Despair.
here is, like you just told me, the lowest generation of a biblical worldview, oddly enough, has the lowest hope.
Yeah,
in
right?
society. It's not a huge disconnect.
Right.
And they express that by laughing at it? Is that the idea?
What else? do you
Since
do?
it's hopeless, we might as well laugh.
Eat,
Right.
drink, and be merry is, I think.
Right, is a little bit.
We might as well laugh when we're not committing suicide.
Yeah.
Right, right.
I mean, but this is scriptural. We shall eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we shall.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. If there's no hope, lean into it.
Okay, and so here's some facts to back that up. 58% agree that many religions can lead to eternal life. There is no one true religion. This is a fairly recent Barna poll, if you want to look up. In fact, later on, I'll give you my information. If you want any of my citations, I'm happy to share them with you. 37% believe it's not possible to know for sure if God is real, compared to 32% of all adults. So you can see, obviously, a rise. 46% say I need factual evidence to support my beliefs, which is consistent kind of with millennials, actually. And then this is the big one, guys. Atheism is on the rise. It's almost doubled in Gen Z.
Ready?
Yep.
What does this mean?
Good Lutheran question.
We're taking everything absurd and trying to make it normal. We are supposed to be. And by normal, again, let's not confuse normal and common. Because our religion is absurd. You need to start with this and recognize that this is where the disconnect is. The whole foundation of our religion is that a guy who is dead stopped being dead. And that's absurd. If you go to church, your pastor will say, this piece of bread is the body of God, and you're going to eat God's body now, but let's also keep things in check. Like that's what he says. This is weird stuff. But when we are coming up to a generation that is so been rooted into not only being further and further away from the church, further and further away from looking at things like, I don't know, books, which are kind of important to us as sources for truth, older generations as authority figures, all of these places, we come to a place of trying to figure out how do we talk to them, and more often than not, we take everything that is absurd about our religion and we try to make it common. And something happens there. We end up sort of either intellectualizing a faith, and so we either make it into a dogmatic multiple choice question of how many parts of the catechism can you quote and memorize. Can you sing me a song with all 66 books of the Bible? Don't matter if it can help you deal with the depression that you have, but sing the song. We turn it into a political viewpoint instead of a hope. Or on the other side, turn it into entertainment. Like, well, maybe at least distract you for an hour from what's going on, sort of like the beauty filter TikTok, because everybody's broken up about what's going on, but if you don't have real hope, let's just distract ourselves from it for just a little bit until we cannot anymore. The problem with this is that we end up running away from everything that would actually make us uniquely equipped to address what's going on, to actually make things how they are supposed to be again by utter absurdity. Give me one more boop here. Boop.
Boop.
If you could reason with religious people, there would be no religious people. We are afraid of this. And so we are afraid of looking dumb when we argue with a generation that also can Google stuff.
Yeah.
And they're really, really good at it. Do you remember the time when you would sit at a restaurant and disagree about which team won the Super Bowl 4 years ago, and it would just be the topic of the because nobody bothered to check? Now they'll just check. If you make stuff up, they will call you on it. If you are wrong, they will call you on it and they will love it.
They will ask their
And
Google.
so we tend to dumb it down. And so we have become so afraid that if we are too religious in public, it'll just mean that we are too stupid looking in public. But more and more, I am convinced that we actually need to lean into the absurdity. And it helps us with this. There are 29% of Gen Z says they cannot find evidence of a good and loving deity because of all the existence of suffering and evil. And this is not a new question. No. This is, in fact, the first real question with religion. And here's the thing. You can give either a common answer or an absurd answer. And one of them, I think, is actually a lot more helpful than the other. So the common answers I hear to, how can you find the existence of a good, loving God in the world that looks like this one? And people will say, well, God totally has a plan for your life. You've heard this, right? You're smirking at me, so I know you've heard this. And here's the thing. It's not at all helpful if you don't know what the plan is, first of all. That's like when my kids answer, are we there yet? And I just say no. They know that there's not there yet, but simply if they can't understand how much longer they have to sit in the car, there's no help at all. If we sort of say there is just no God at all, which is the other common answer for this, well, if there's suffering in a world where they say there's an all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good God, there's a disconnect somewhere. Maybe there's just no God. These are the common answers that I hear. Either, on one hand, there's atheism, which is on the rise, or Christianity, which wants to talk about vague plans. I want an absurd plan. I know why there is an existence of evil. Sin breaks stuff. It's a very complex thing we try to make of it, but at the end of the day, sin breaks stuff. The kids understand it too. Do you want to live in the part of town where you're more or less likely to get stabbed? It's very simple. The fifth commandment, good one to have around. Big fan. Do you, recognize that it's hard to grow up as a product of divorce? It is. That you don't want to be the kid in school that everybody talks about. Maybe that eighth commandment matters just a little bit. Sin breaks stuff. And instead of sort of saying, why is there evil? I can find the evil. It's from me. It's just finding the existence of a good and loving God. Maybe let's do a really absurd answer. I can find God right in the middle of it, bearing it all unto death on a cross.
And you're calling that an absurd answer?
Yes.
It is absurd, yeah.
It's absurd that God, who could control all the things in the world and make you not hurt, would put himself in the hurt. That's the definition of absurd. But that's also the definition of hope. I can find God in the middle of a world that looks like this one. He's hanging on a cross for our sins. He's not abandoning us. He's not saying, you guys fix it, here's how. He's actually bearing it all unto nothing and rising from the grave. And that is profoundly weird. And it's magnificent. We can do another one. 23% of them would say that Christians are hypocrites. And the common answer would actually, we've got some
100%.
absurdity right here. That's it. Yeah, actually, yeah. The common answer would sort of be to say, well, at least we're not, and then throw rocks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We love to throw us some rocks. It's great. There's that first stone business, but not the he who has no sin business. That's not okay. Let's maybe grab into an absurd answer. Do you know what a hypocrite is? A hypocrite is somebody who believes in something bigger than themselves. You say hypocrisy is saying one thing and doing the other. That's simply saying, I believe in something I can't actually achieve. I believe that there is something bigger than me, which is the definition of God at a very simplistic level.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that, yes, I am not a perfect example of what God is. If I could perfectly demonstrate what God is to you, my God is very tiny and insignificant.
Mm-hmm.
I can hardly work the settings on my dishwasher. If I can perfectly represent God who made all things, you need a bigger God. Let's embrace this. It's not good to be a hypocrite, but maybe there's help, because when there's evil in the world and hypocrites in the church, there's a Jesus who forgives sinners. There is hope for you. What about 20% would say that science disproves the Bible? And the common thing to do then would to sort of minimize the faith. And so I don't really want to talk about creation. You pick your own stance on evolution, but really what you need to know is that God loves everyone. Or just sort of a raw authoritarian approach to it. No, there's creation because I said so, don't ask questions, shut up, sit down. And I've seen both. I really have. And an absurd answer would be, there was a guy who died and stopped being dead, and I cannot explain how that happened, but like 500 people saw it, hung on to it even as they faced death themselves. And despite the fact that our church hid in catacombs for generations, clung to this truth. I can't explain it. It's absurd. But this guy who stopped being dead is promising hope. Let's keep going.
Okay.
It actually matters that we embrace the absurdity for this, because when we start to talk about what religion looks like, they're very vocal. 59% of Gen Z would say that religion is not relevant to them personally. So give me a common way to address somebody who would say religion is not relevant to them. How would you? What's a common thing you hear when somebody tells you religion is not relevant to me personally? What's a common thing we do?
When you die.
Well, we'll say, well, one day you're going to die, so it's going to become relevant. A death threat is always a great opener for communication.
I would like to ask, what is relevant to you?
What is relevant to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. So we'll make this relevant to you, right? We'll find a way to sort of fit this in.
Just curious, what's relevant to you?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
good.
Right.
So let's do an absurd one. Christianity is not actually about being trendy. It's about addressing your conscience and your identity. Both of these are things that Gen Z struggles with immensely. Their suicide rates are through their charts. Their identity, the reason that they are struggling to make up new genders is because when I look at what male is supposed to be and I don't fit those boxes, who am I supposed to be? What if we could actually give you an identity rooted in a baptism? God splashed water on you, and here you became his child. Here, you are no longer known by what you are not, what you have failed to live up to be, what other people would say about you, or even what you struggle to see in yourself. You are known simply as this, somebody for whom God died, somebody who belongs here, and somebody who cannot be taken from this place because God would literally die and rise again to keep you here. And so when you feel like you are not enough, when you struggle with anxiety and despair and depression, when all of these things pile onto you and leave you feeling broken and alone, you are loved. Guilt is not yours. And that's an absurd thing to tell somebody who is overwhelmed by it. But we point to something absurd. There's a Jesus who died and rose for you. And 20% would say that church is out of date. And so the thing that we would sort of do is recognize that when I try to talk like Gen Z,
You look like a dork.
I look like a dork all the time. Now I look like a dork
even
who's
dorkier.
trying way too
Yeah.
hard. And so there's a chasing the tail thing here that's always going to be just a little bit lockstep. We will not be them because we are not them. It just isn't going to ever really be there. But then rather, what if we gave them a really absurd answer? Like, you're actually communing with St. Paul and your grandma, and the church is timeless. And that doesn't mean that it has to look or sound a certain way, but that there are saints that are beyond number, right here, all struggling with the same things. And some of them have broken free from it. Some of them are no longer burdened by anxiety and despair and sin and death. They've gone to glory, and we're on the same side. Because this Jesus, he's binding us together. 48% would say you can find God elsewhere. And the common answer is, well, yeah, God is everywhere, man. But also, just point of order, please don't ever take medical advice from somebody who ends sentences in comma man. Never
Yeah.
take legal advice
I
from
haven't.
somebody who ends sentences in comma, man. And definitely don't take theological advice from somebody who would say man at the end of their sentence. God is everywhere, but it doesn't mean you're going to be able to find him. It just means that if you already believe and you squint, you might sort of see evidence that he passed, and I'll give you proof. You remember this old Bible story, Moses and the Red Sea, mildly significant event because a dude ripped an ocean in half, kind of a cool thing. I wish I could do it. It would make life really easy for me. Not just because like boats, but just I think people would come to church if I could rip an ocean in half and, I don't know, slam it back together on them if they didn't. But the problem with God ripping the sea open and Moses walking down the middle is, you remember who was chasing him? Pharaoh and a whole army. So this whole army looks at the dude who ripped the ocean right in half, looks back at Pharaoh and says, I know which one I'm more afraid of.
Yeah.
And they followed Pharaoh into the dude ripped the ocean in half. And they did not see a miracle. Do you know why? Miracles only happen if you already believe. You can only actually see a miracle if you already believe. Otherwise, it's just going to be, there's an explanation for this. I might not know it, but I'll figure it out. You will only ever see a miracle if you already believe. Apart from this, you will never see it. But if you believe, you see miracles everywhere. And it matters how we talk about this too. Because if I start from the miracle, I'm always going to sound off base. Not just absurd, but off base. So here's the deal. I moved a week and a half ago, and when I moved, I drove a giant 28-foot U-Haul towing a car. The brakes were sort of a mere suggestion to other cars that I might be coming too fast and something that would actually change the speed of the vehicle. And I drove it through, somehow, 3 major winter storms that dropped a foot and 2 feet of snow all over the place. I got a couple of raindrops. It was a miracle to me that I didn't die. But anybody else? A miracle or just...
Luck.
Good for you. Look, weather.com. Proud of you. Here's the thing. 48% would say I can find God elsewhere. And the absurd answer is no, you can't. There might be a God who can work elsewhere, who is willing to work elsewhere, but he reveals himself in certain places and in certain ways. God works where his word is preached, where his gifts are given. And there's a reason that we come to church. It's because God is working there for you and you can find him there. There's a difference between going to a restaurant that just wants to tell you about a cheeseburger and one that can actually feed you one. Nobody wants to go and hear about a cheeseburger if they're not going to give it to you. That's a bait and switch. Don't go to that restaurant. 1-star review, would not do again. Rather, if you can actually be fed there might be a reason to go. If church is just about Jesus and Jesus is not there, there is no good reason to go to church at all. But if Jesus is actually present in church for you, in that font, in that bread, in that wine, in that word, in that song, now I can find him. And when everything is falling apart, he's usually hung up somewhere around. And I can say, that's right, he died for all the things that are wrong. That's right, there is hope here for the people struggling with it. Help me out.
Tie right into the idea of atheism. It's like, maybe if to have the idea that I can find God elsewhere, that just says that there is a God.
Right, but more importantly too, that you can find God would sort of assume that he's hiding. Right? This is not hide and seek for Jesus. Even though this is sort of what it is. Because I can look out and say, I found God. I didn't die on this highway when I dodged a snowstorm. But at the end of the day, God is screaming to you from a big book. This is where I am. This is how you find me. Go into all of the nations. And when you are going there, do certain things. Because this way, lo, I will be with you always. Even at the end of the age, he says, baptize them. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and disciple them. Teach them to observe the things which I have commanded you to do. I know how to find God with me always. I look to doing the things that he has commanded me to do, and I look to the baptism. I look to the church. That's where God wants to be with us. So he's not hiding. He's screaming, this is where I am. It's just sort of like the Red Sea. Believing, I look at the cracker and I say, that's his body. I don't understand it. It's absurd, but it forgives my sins. I need that. Believing, I look and I say, I feel like I don't belong here because I am not as good or righteous or moral or upstanding as any of these other people, and I am sure every last one of them sees it because I cannot but. And then my pastor will tell me, your sins are forgiven. You belong here.
I don't see how just the consistent appeal to absurdity is going to be enough. Well, how come I can't say, I believe that the moon is a big jam donut? It's absurd, I believe it.
Because you didn't rise from the dead.
Yeah.
Start
Okay,
there.
all right, good. So, but now you're rooting this in a rational
Right.
argument.
Yes.
Yeah.
One that is not afraid to say something that people will struggle with.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? You can tell me the moon is made out of cheese, and I will say, cool, rise from the dead. I will listen to you. Do that. But the first step, because to rise from the dead, you got to die. Downer. Not recommending. 1 star. Would not recommend. 28% say I can teach myself everything that I need to know. And again, this becomes a struggle for the church. Where do we speak to these kids? And so we have run to the technology because we want to reach them. We want to equip them and teach them. And the common answer would be, all right, so if that's where you're going to be, that's where I'm going to speak. And that's actually my whole job. I put stuff on the internet about Jesus for kids. But here's the thing. What if this was more than just teaching facts? Just like you said. What if this was actually an identity that knit you into something else? You are the body of Christ and individually members of it. And so Jesus is not just something that you know, but something that you hope in. And being the body of Christ, it means that you matter and you have an identity as part of the family of God, the household of God. I cannot cut my hand off, leave it in the closet for a week and expect it to be okay. We're actually supposed to be together. And so knowing about God is not the same as receiving Him.
Excellent. All right, that was really heavy weighty, so we're going to have a little fun for just a moment. So I've been kind of sneaky. One of the things I want to do as a former high school teacher is give you ideas on how to engage Gen Z, and the way we've been teaching this class is how I recommend engaging Gen Z. So right now we're going to play a little Kahoot. Are you guys familiar with Kahoot? Do you guys have your phones? Anybody? Raise your hand if you know what Kahoot is. Awesome. Okay, so you're going to need your phone. Hopefully it'll work. If not, we'll just hopefully your phone will work. All right.
Is my phone?
No, I will explain in just a minute, I promise. All right. And volume. Okay, so here's what you're going to do. Go into your, just your browser. If you've got Safari, if you've got a smartphone, which is, I consider an iPhone. If you've got a dumb phone, which I consider any other phone, go into your browser to Kahoot. It will ask you, it will take you to a screen that says enter your game pin. You type in this number 7930125, and then you will give yourself a little screen name. This is the kids' favorite thing to do, is to name themselves. Sometimes it's an emoji, sometimes it's one of those weird words I don't understand. Are you guys successfully finding? Oh, Judy got it, David got it, good, okay, excellent. We're gonna do a little quiz. I know the millennials are playing Kahoot, right?
Nope.
You haven't?
Never.
Oh, this will be fun. Okay.
So is it, oh, I see, there's a number there.
You actually just scan it.
You can also, if you can reach, you can scan the code as well. Go for it if you're having trouble. Did I lose it? Oh, thank you. Oh, how wonderful. Southwest lost my baggage, so I can't afford to lose anything else. What? She's my address in Target. Yeah, I'll at Target. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, battery saver.
Hey, it's terrible. I was just 5 days. We're on day 5. Still without my dog mom. How? All right. All right. Raise your hand if you need a little more time. You got it.
I'm supposed to give myself a nickname?
Yep. Be appropriate, please.
Right. Be appropriate. Yeah.
Just like I tell the kids.
All right. Grateful. All right, so this is going to be a little quiz about Gen Z. Some of them are true, false. Some of them are multiple choice. The way to win and get on the leaderboard is to answer correctly.
And quickly.
Are we ready? Anybody else is still waiting on? Where do we type it? All right. Here we go. I'll read the question so you can see. Help me out here.
I got you.
Oh, you got it? Please do. Thank you, women.
True or false? Gen Z is the most ethnically, racially, and religiously diverse generation in the United States. True or false?
Were you paying attention?
Which one's which?
Blue is true,
Blue
red is false.
True, red is false. At least on this one. Sometimes it scrambles.
Y'all did good.
14 and up.
Hey, you guys were paying attention. Nicely done. Oh, we got Mo on top. Way to go.
Oh, he's faster.
You get points for how quick you are.
Oh.
Now
All
you
right,
tell
this
us.
is multiple choice.
What is the average number of videos Gen Z watches online each day? 36, 68, 17, or 102? Look at the colors, match them up.
You didn't tell us.
No, guess.
The number of videos to watch.
How many they watch each day
I prefer to
online?
answer absurdly.
I like you.
Yeah, absurdly. He's really latching on to that. All right,
The
the
answer
answer
is
is 68. How'd you guys do?
Woo!
Renee.
Wow, look at you.
What? True or false?
Gen Z likes to multitask. On average, they work off 5 screens at once. True or false?
I think.
Look at that picture. You tell me. 5 screens at once.
I do not even understand how
I'll
this is true.
50-50.
Who's got 5 screens?
Does that mean like one at school, one at home?
Yeah, actually, I do too.
TV, computer, laptop, iPad, watch, phone.
We'll get there. Yep.
Phone.
Or gaming console. Oh, nice job. All right, true or false?
True or false? 7 out of 10 Gen Zers say it is important to defend causes related to identity. True or false?
Ooh, I hear some fast answers.
That tally on the side.
Isn't that cool?
Huh?
Yeah. They
True.
love it. They love this.
Oh, hey.
Off the leaderboard.
Ruh-roh. Ooh, Donna's on
Donna.
fire! Way to go, Donna.
After
Gets
it.
you, Mo.
After it. True or false? The majority of Gen Z is not Christian. The majority of Gen Z is not Christian. True or false?
Blue is true. Red is false.
Is not Christian. True or false?
All right. That is true.
True.
So we just clicked it on.
Uh-oh.
Come on.
Jody's on top. All right. Here we go. True or false again.
Members of Gen Z are less focused. The average attention span is I'm bored.
I put the goldfish there for a reason.
Yeah.
Did not give you permission to use my likeness.
Fun fact, that's true, and that is actually a shorter attention span than a goldfish, friends.
How many seconds?
I love to take them.
8 seconds is a goldfish. Theirs is less.
They did a
What's
study,
the
it's
average
under 3
TikTok?
now.
Goodman, do you know what the average TikTok length is?
So if you have not grabbed somebody within the first 4 seconds of a TikTok, you're done.
You're done, yeah, about 4 seconds.
Okay, put up your hand if you've got a problem
Very
with Jody
nice.
and Donna
Very
always being up there.
How many Gen Z students are expected to have a college education? 1 in 2, 1 in 3, 1 in 4, or 1 in 5? How many Gen Z students are expected to have a college education? One in 2.
So this is kind of a cool fact. They are expected, half of all of Gen Z are expected to have a 4-year degree. They're on that trajectory.
Never in the house.
And be in debt, yes.
Yes.
Right, and that's happening too. I mean, that might kind of balance things out a little bit, but.
Will it be like online though?
Right, a lot of it will be online. It'll be very different. All right, who's on our podium? Dun, dun, dun. KJ.
KJ.
All right, nicely done.
Jody.
Number 2. Very good. And number 1. Dun, dun, dun. 1. All right, you are a Gen Z expert. I got no prize for you other than that expert. Okay, so I want to give you. Honey, back over there. Let me forget my phone.
Don't forget your phone.
I know, right? Thanks. You tell me.
I'm helpful.
I know you are so helpful. Okay, so
How they placed.
was that fun?
That was fun.
That was fun.
They love that.
I love that.
It's fun stuff. Okay, so I want to call you back to mind some of the 4 things that we talked about, right? This unidentified identity in Gen Z, this idea of being a communaholic, the dialoguer, and realistic. Do you guys see evidence of that kind of in your interactions with Gen Z? Is that a kind of a common theme, kind of common thread?
But it's communaholic only amongst themselves.
Yes,
It's not
that
with-
is correct.
It's not with other generations.
For now, and to be fair, if you think about when your generation was young, right, you felt like your generation was the only generation that understood you. I think that will grow and change as time goes on, as they mature. But what I really want to talk to you about is, oops, wrong direction. One of my big takeaways is from Gen Z and interacting with them as a teacher when you're trying to teach them, right? Teaching them the faith, is I think we just simply don't do enough listening. And by what I mean by listening is not just the, oh, I just finished talking so that I can like tell you what I think, right? There's a quote actually by Alan Alda. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but I'll read the whole thing to you. But this is the nugget from it. Real listening is a willingness to let the other person to let the other person change you. So this is the whole quote. The difference between listening and pretending to listen, I discovered, is enormous. One is fluid, the other is rigid. One is alive, the other is stuffed. Eventually, I found a radical way of thinking about listening. Real listening is a willingness to let the other person change you. When I'm willing to let them change me, something happens between us that's more interesting than just a pair of dueling monologues. If you look at Gen Z, they see this kind of behavior all the time. If you really want to develop a relationship with Gen Z, you must listen to them. And I mean really listen to them. Take your time getting to know them. Take your time respecting and listening to their worldview. There's a really good story, actually. This is kind of a fail by somebody in the church, but kind of locally by us, there's a new family in church that came because they had brought their 13-year-old son to their former church because he had a best friend that was struggling with gender identity. And they went to pastor and said, hey, our son is really struggling with this because he wants to help this friend. This friend is really hurting, and we find so much comfort here at church, and how can we help this friend? And the pastor just straight up looked at the family and said, I guess you have one less friend.
Oh.
You cannot, we have to do better as a church. We absolutely have to do better as a church. We need to listen to the cares and concerns of broken people and care about them. We need to walk with them a little bit in their pain. You have got to be a good listener. That is really what develops relationships. They really need to get the message that I see you, I hear you, and what you say matters to me. You have to listen on that level in order to really have the right to influence them. And they will. They will respond in kind. But it does take time. And it takes intention. So really listen. I know it sounds simple, but it really is the first step. It's the biggest thing. Yep. The other thing I want to say, of course, as a teacher, is to know and understand their learning preferences. We've actually just taught this session a la Gen Z to you guys. I've dabbled in a few things and kind of shown you what we've done. I would never go this long for a Gen Z session, by the way. Never would go this long, because you're all adults. Happy to do it. So here are just some of my general thoughts on how to engage Gen Z. Understand that Gen Z is smart, creative, and hardworking. I don't know about you guys. Like, my daughter did 2 years of college already in high school. Like, she was in Calc 1, Calc 2. If you are teaching them the faith, give them everything you've got. If you don't know something, say, I don't know it, but I'm willing to look it up for you. I'm willing to go find a resource about it. Do not dumb it down for them because they're young. You will lose credibility with them instantly. If they want to talk about a tough issue, talk about it with them. And if you're afraid to do it, go phone a friend, get an expert. Don't be afraid to say, be authentic with them, right? Don't be afraid to say, I gotta go look that up. Provide access. And this is kind of one of the things that they do in education, which I think is a good thing. They are all about access. So give them multiple ways of doing things, okay? Multiple ways of engaging in things. In technology, but maybe even paper. There are some kids that flat out prefer paper and pencil still. Ask them what they want, what they need. Break up content into short segments. We've kind of done this in our breakaway here too, right? Break up the content into different types of learning activities. That is what will keep them engaged. If you're having a Bible study, remember when I had you guys turn and talk for a little bit for discussion? They're highly relational. Do that. Break it up a little bit. Allow them to talk. Get them to relate to one another so that they can share with you. Present info in graphical and bite-sized format. Look at how they consume information. Do you ever see kind of the things they scroll through? Like, so if you grew up in previous generations, we saw things left to right. From the time that they were little digital natives, they had bursts of information in different clouds. They actually look and interact with their world in a different way because their brains are literally hardwired differently than ours are. Okay? If you can do that, do it. Digital engagement, as Pastor Goodman said, this is a tool. Use it, and use it well. Use it as a tool within your vocation. Don't be afraid of it. Ask them to help you. I can't tell you how many times, like when my Kahoot didn't work, I would ask one of my kids, hey, can you help me? Right? Can you help me figure this out? I don't know how to do Kahoot, but I want to with our Bible study this week. Help me figure this out. They will be so enthralled and thrilled to help you out with that. But do a little bit. Again, like I said, do a little bit. Doesn't mean you have to only engage with them that way, because as we said, it's just a tool. And understand that they are more geared towards adaptive learning and individualized learning. So traditional instruction always kind of went this way, and if you went to school when I did, this is how it was. The instructor kind of finds content, organizes content, edits it, and then goes to the students. Students, everybody gets the same content, and if you miss a concept, you're just kind of left behind. Everyone moves at the same pace. Adaptive learning is more you decide what to teach, decide your topic, hopefully with a little bit of their input, what they're interested in, and then coach and manage the students and engage the students, and use tech to engage their learning just for them. Try to skip stuff that they already know, allow them to kind of skip what they already know, get their recommendations, and then they end up mastering kind of all the concepts. So again, more adaptive and individualized. And then again, I just remember I said that they're dialoguers. Use guided discussions, right? One of the biggest tools I would say to help you get kids, you kind of get, if you're working with youth, they sometimes kind of shut down, right? You just ask the whole group a question and nobody's going to raise their hand, or it'll be always the same kid that raises their hand, right? Break them up into little groups, have them discuss different topics, and then share back out and assign them those topics, right? Break up and use guided discussion to, really the most powerful learning tool is not to overtly tell them what you want them to know, but to get them to arrive on it by questions, right? So try to do that. Try to work that into it, because it's always more powerful learning when you come upon the answer yourself, right? So use the Bible, use your Bible studies, use the questions to get them to the answer, okay? Any questions on that? We're kind of running down on time, so I want to make sure you guys get out of here. All right. Pastor Goodman.
Yes.
It's you.
Pull it all together. Stop arguing over labels and embrace community with them. Share the gospel. That at the end of the day, there actually is something unique that happens inside of the church. Jesus forgives our sins. Jesus ties us to life that death cannot destroy. Jesus gives us hope and life. Let's engage with that. Instead of arguing over the gender issue, instead of arguing over the LGBTQI issue, say this is a sinner that Jesus died for, and so are you. We actually share the gospel. We root it then in an identity. Inside of our callings as Christians, as we relate to one another. We are not then the sum of our political parties, our abilities, and our genders, or any of these other things. We are the sinners that Jesus died for. And as we relate to one another, we'll do so in ways that are the way they're supposed to be. Pastors will preach, and sinners will be forgiven. Husbands and wives will raise families. Children will be reared up in a fear and understanding of the Lord. These Bible verses don't stop being true just because they're being pushed against. It's actually the really great hope of it, that if this stuff is true, and we're willing to bet our souls on the fact that it is true, you can kick at the tires. It is not fragile. Don't be afraid of it, and lean into it. Root your identity then simply as this: you are a holy one of God, that He has washed clean in His blood, and embrace the mystery of it. Embrace the fact that this is not always perfectly something that you can get your head around, because God is bigger than you. Embrace the mystery, rather than simply the outward trappings. You are not a Christian because you sit in a pew on Sunday. You are not a Christian because you behave a certain way or talk a certain way. Something really crazy happened. God splashed some water on you, and He made you His child, and this is who you are now. We get to actually talk about each other then as more than the sum of our parts. We get to talk about each other as those for whom Christ has bled and died. And so when we relate to each other, something otherworldly is happening. It truly is. That as we gather together as Christians, we are knit together into something then that all of the things that seem like they are changing faster and faster and faster cannot undo or even hinder, let alone destroy. We are bound together in something timeless, with angels, with Jesus who stopped being dead. And inside of all of these things, we also recognize then that it's not our job to make them that way. God did it. It's not our job to keep this from falling apart this generation. He's kept it through a lot worse than TikTok. Like, you understand that, right? That God kept his church when we were hiding in the catacombs. God kept his church when it was illegal to be a Christian. God kept his church through plague and pandemic and every other thing. TikTok and people who talk in memes will not destroy it. It cannot. In fact, it's for them. And so when we lean into this, we actually have something that is also uniquely equipped for Gen Z. Like, this is a really exciting time to be a Christian and actually a Lutheran. Because we get to lean on something that is not rooted in an identity for a group that is struggling to find their own. We get to lean on something that is full of hope for those who have seemed to have gone completely without it. We get to lean on something that is free in a generation that is so afraid of being sold to because everywhere they look somebody is. We actually have a group of very, very intelligent people being met with a very, very robust faith. You guys have the answers to the very hard questions. And if you cannot use their math workbooks because they're doing stuff that you don't understand, understand that they can do your hard theology. You can give them the real answers, and they will actually cling to them. When we dumb this down, when we sell this to them, and when we make this common, when it should be utterly absurd, we miss out on the opportunity of a lifetime, because here we actually have the very same thing that they are struggling with, put an answer for them, and fed in a way that actually knits them into heaven itself. It's a joy.
Right. Well, thank you for coming. If you have any questions, please email me or Pastor Goodman. I'm happy to share presentation, my research. It's a very long list, but I'm happy to share it with you. Let us know if you have questions. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming. Thank you.